Hello, everybody. Welcome to Take the Black, the one and only show on the internet where we dare to discuss topics like movies, TV, sci-fi, fantasy, dragon, space, and so on and so forth. I am Dan Selcke, and I am here as usual with Daniel Roman, the co-editors of
Hello.
winnerscoming.net. Daniel, how's your hand?
It's good. I have a ladybug who's guest starring today because they just decided to crash the pod.
Love it.
Wait.
Generally good. How are you?
Solid. And we also have two special guests this week. If you don't recognize them from our Sunday shows, we have both Natalie Zamora and we have Savannah Leigh, who have been helping us break down, recap, review, and just dig into the red raw meat of every new episode of HBO's Game of Thrones prequel show House of the Dragon every Sunday. And now that House of the Dragon has wrapped up its first season, the wigs have come off, the dragons have settled down into the they're I don't know, they're on the ground for the foreseeable future. That'll be a great time to get the gang back together and just talk through with you all out there watching internet land. What were the high points of House of Dragon season 1? What were the low points? Did it work? Was it successful from the perspective of what HBO wanted it to do? Was it successful as a TV show that we enjoyed? Was it successful as a rival to the Lord of the Rings of Power over on that other network that everyone was talking about? Where is it going? Where has it been? Is Game of Thrones back? Did it ever leave? Like, the questions are all out there, and we're going to get down to the bottom of them, everyone, as long as it doesn't take over an hour. So I guess I will just have a question for the group to start. So we all liked the series. We know that. What
Safe to say
about it do you think made you enjoy it? What made it a successful show for you?
That's a broad question.
Yeah, like what's the moment you remember being like, oh, this is working for me?
The battle scene in the Stepstones with Damon and
Oh yeah,
them, probably, yeah. I just think that was just such an
Nice.
epic moment, and it just made me remember like how epic all of the Game of Thrones battles were, and I was like, okay, so they're still hitting all the marks. I think the jousting in episode 1, just episode
Ooh,
1
it's
in
good.
general,
Yeah.
just seeing how much more of the budget that there was versus Game of Thrones was really something. I just feel like they took that time to really hit all the details that we were missing sometimes in Game of Thrones. So yeah, those are two things. But then again, I've just been watching like the earlier episodes to remind myself today.
Well, Savannah, like, watching the earlier episodes, do you find it interesting now that you've seen the whole thing? Are you like watching them differently or having different reactions now that you're going back?
Yeah, kind of. I don't think I'd look at it differently. I think I could. These are, to me, I'm already somebody who watches them over again anyway, but I feel like I can rewatch kind of like I do with Game of Thrones. Like every now and then, I just dynamics or whatever are like night and day. We
Really?
see Uncle Damon in episode 10, but at the same time, like, he has this much more complex emotional element to him, whether it's Rhaenyra and him being together or whatever. But in episode 1, he's just completely unhinged, doesn't give a crap about it. He's just going to do whatever he wants because he's this, the rogue prince. But by episode 10, it's a little more refined and more mature, kind of like Rhaenyra says in episode 4.
Well, I mean, yeah, but also not totally. He's still got that devil may care joie de vivre that makes him so dangerous. Natalie, was there like a high point for you to this first season that you remember being like, ooh, that's it?
Honestly, the premiere. I thought the premiere
was good.
was really, really good, really strong, a great way to start the show. And, I had some nerves going into this. I didn't know what to expect. Of course, it's HBO. So, I mean, HBO is my favorite network. Like, I will watch anything on there. The production is going to be good, at least. But yeah, it really impressed me. I thought it was a great way to introduce this new story. Of course, the story is great. We all know this. That's why they're making it a show. But the characters, the acting was so good. And I just fell in love with Rhaenyra right away. It was really easy to like these characters, even though all of them are so gray. And I know someone said that in the comments too, like
Yes.
the characters are just so complex, and we got that in the first episode. So I was sold right away. The final scene with the Game of Thrones music, I was like, the chills are here. This is it. We're back.
We have Mimi Faye saying, I like the fact that the characters were neither totally bad and good, which, yeah, I agree with. I think there was a little bit of kerflunkination at times, but mostly, yeah, they successfully did that. The premiere was strong. Like, out of the gate, it was like, this is a confident show. This is a show that is going places that immediately the old show didn't go. Like, we had the joust, we had the C-section pregnancy horror show. I thought Viserys, Rhaenyra, and Daemon popped pretty quickly. It was good. Like, they definitely knew what they were doing, and they chose the right thing. Daniel, when you watched the premiere, were your nerves wiped away, or were you still in a wait and see posture?
My nerves were pretty immediately wiped away. I think, I was ready to give this show a chance. I was hoping it would be good. I was hype going into it, but I think the seeing Rhaenyra fly into King's Landing in the second scene of the show, they brought back some of the Targaryen music and then kind of moved into this montage of King's Landing where we see her and Alicent walking around in the Red Keep. And I feel like those scenes really kind of pulled me in and let me know, okay, this, like Natalie was saying, this is a confident show out of the gate, and it feels both very similar and different than Game of Thrones. And I think the thing that really, really hooked me was, so I watched the first 6 episodes all in a row.
That's
all in one night.
And
forgot about that.
So this was before we knew there was going to be time jumps like every other episode. So seeing that and kind of getting that feel that, like, okay, this almost feels like an anthology series with how it's treating each section of its story. That was the thing that made me think, okay, this is going to work, and it's going to be different enough from Game of Thrones that it's going to make its own mark.
What do we think of the time jumps? Because I mean, so they're doing things that are kind of daring, like that. I don't think I've thought of this being done before, where you have these, like 2 year, 6 month, 10 year, 6 year time jumps in between episodes, recasting major roles about halfway through, and then we had all the younger kids who also got recast. I mean, it seems like people didn't mind them, obviously, because they kept watching, and it feels like people are pretty invested. Did those work for you, or do you wish that they had gone on the way that they had explored anything more in between? Or are we looking at this and saying, like, they did it right? Or should they have done like a flashback thing? Like, was this the right approach now that you've seen the complete picture?
I like that it was linear. Definitely not about so many flashbacks in shows. That's not really my favorite thing. So I'm glad it was like that. The time jumps worked for me. I do think, and I think we've talked about this before, like, the show asks a lot of you. You have to just trust them that, these things happen in between the episodes. You're not going to see it. Alicent's big personality change after 10 years, we just had to say, okay, yeah, that's how she is now, which is fine for me. I know there were complaints about the time jumps, but for me personally, I think it was fine. I was willing to go along with it. And I think the way that it turned out, now that we've seen all the episodes, it worked. And I'm excited for no more time jumps in season 2, just to see how that goes.
It's cool that the show will kind of change up again a bit in season 2, that this first season was a bit of an aberration and a unique experiment. I mean, The Crown sort of does it, but even that's like actors every 2 years change over, not like, every couple of episodes. And people in the comments seem to like it too. Tanisha says that the time jumps were necessary to the meat and potatoes of the dance. And then there's a little like emoji of, what is that? The time jumps have pros and cons.
It's someone. Yeah, someone dancing.
Oh, fun. Oh, it's right. Cool. Had trouble connecting to a few characters before they changed actors, but overall, not a huge deal. Daniel and Savannah, any comments on that stuff? Because I have another question that I was inspired to ask by Natalie, but I'm curious about your thoughts, if you have any, on time jumping, flip flopping, doing the time warp.
I didn't mind them at all. I think, kind of like Natalie was saying, you just had to trust it a little bit, but also someone who is currently reading the book, there's a lot of things that I get why they needed to do the time jumps too, just because there's just so much in there to pack in there, and like you only have 10 episodes and you're trying to get to the point. To me though, like maybe in that premiere making it a little longer than all the other ones, and kind of like having a flashback of just the kind of Jaehaerys more than just the great council, like lead me up to that or something, like give me just a little bit more, because so far that's probably been one of my favorite parts of this book is Jaehaerys' reign and all like that stuff before everything.
It's cool.
But I didn't mind them because they casted them so well. Like the older and the younger were so connected, even though they didn't film together or really do anything together. Like it was just good charisma, not charisma, good character choice, good character casting.
Yeah.
No, I get you.
I totally agree with that. I think the casting department deserves insane props for this show. I loved the time jumps because it's not something you see, like you were saying, Dan. I can't think of any other show that did as many of them in one season like this, like every couple of episodes.
The Crown's the only thing that pops into my head that kind of is sort of comparable. It's still different.
Yeah, which was Ryan Condal has said was their biggest benchmark that he used as a comparison outside of Game of Thrones was The Crown. I loved it. I think there is something to be said for a story that can cover a huge span of time, like in a single installment. So like this is one season and it's like almost 30 years, which you rarely see something like that. So I think it was a really bold choice. I think there are so many ways it could have gone wrong. Yes. I think that's true for flashbacks too. They can so easily go wrong. And I don't think it did. I think this season did what it needed to do. Are there things I wish we got more of? Sure. I would have loved more time with like Lena Valerian and Damon as a couple. Yeah, or Harwin Strong. But I think knowing, they're telling this story of the Dance of the Dragons, I don't think it would have been smart to leave off earlier, like to make season 1 shorter or make it so the dance doesn't start until the end of season 2. Like this was the way I think it had to go down.
Younger actors. Yeah, I agree. I do think I thought they had a very hard job because you're right. It could have gone wrong so easily. Like we've watched it go wrong. I watched The Witcher.
Yeah.
I've watched like flashback heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Like we've seen this kind of thing go wrong. I do have, but okay. So we said a lot of nice stuff. It's time to complain. If anything, now that I've watched the whole thing, I kind of wish they would have gone further, because now that I've seen all 10 of it, why not? I mean, I kind of wish now they would have like a young actor for Kristen Cole too, to like kind of have him be in like a 18, 17, 16-year-old for the younger parts, because he's pushing the limits a little bit when it comes to how old are you? Matt Smith, they kind of got away with, I thought, because he's like in his late 30s, the actor, and he's like in his 20s at the start and his like 50s at the end. Okay. Sorry, Savannah.
He takes care of himself, Dan.
Yes. I need to know his skincare routine.
I mean,
Dragonfire
worked for whatever reason.
Really good saunas. They have great saunas on Dragonstone.
He gets in Caraxe's mouth and just hangs out there for a while, sweats it out.
That's right. That's right.
I guess I wish that they would, like, I don't know, apply like something or a little bit, but mainly it was, I wish Kristen had a younger actor, but otherwise, yeah, big success. I want to pose, okay, so again, with more complaining, I thought all the characters, the big, like the ones that pop the most, even now, are Rhaenyra, Daemon, Viserys. I want to ask a question about Alicent Hightower, because she, to me, was the main character, like really someone they invested in, who I had the most trouble kind of getting a handle on. And now that I've seen the whole thing, I can put this into context a bit more. That, Rhaenyra from the start popped, like she became the heir, and then she struggled with that, and then she explored her sexuality, and then she got older and she had kids, and she was still the heir. She got more responsible. I guess I had some problems with Alicent being like Rhaenyra's best friend, and then completely on Team Green and against her, and then she's back with Rhaenyra, and then she is plotting against her, but like not really. I thought she ping-ponged a bit much for my liking. I thought of like the big four that she could have been written a little smoother. Am I alone here, or is anybody else feeling
Yes.
that they like Alicent Hightower, but like I wanted a bit more consideration from her.
I don't like her at all.
There we go. So we've
okay. So
why or why not?
Well,
Show your work.
She's
Carry
just
the one.
in the book. She's just downright hateful and just rude, just hateful and rude. And so it was just, now that seeing them like go back and forth, I'm like, just be rude. Like, you want your son on the throne, like just own that. Like, stop being two-faced.
I agree. Yeah.
And watching back today, like, I felt like there were just some times where she could have told Rhaenyra about her visiting her father, even though Viserys told her not to, but because they're best friends. If y'all are best friends, I tell my best friend everything. Like, even if someone's like, don't tell them. No, like, that's somebody who I confide in. Like, why would you not confide in your best friend, even if it is like, have that conversation? But yeah, no, I just think that they kind of were strategic in how they decided to have her personality change over the years, because I feel like as soon as she got married and had her son, like, that's when the personality change happened in the book. But I don't know, I didn't like the ping pong either. Like, don't be nice to her just because your husband asked you to. Like, no. I don't know.
Mimi Faye likes Alicent. I'm glad we have people here.
Yeah.
As Joy says, though,
Natalie,
Alicent's dad told her all the kids would be killed by the black, so I can see why she was on the other side. Any Daniel and Natalie, any of you have takes on Alicent Hightower and the arc of her personhood?
Natalie, you want to go first?
Yeah, I agree that she ping-ponged a lot, but I didn't dislike it. I think it kind of just showed that she's like unhinged kind of, and she doesn't have like a personality or like an identity at all throughout the whole show. And I think that her going back and forth between like who she was loyal to showed that, because she was just trying to do either the right thing or the thing that made her look the best or feel the best. And she's extremely insecure. And I think from the start, like her and Rhaenyra are close friends, but there's still always going to be that kind of power struggle there, because Rhaenyra doesn't study. She's not like into books. She's not into,
not a nerd.
She's not into like what she's supposed to be into. She just wants to go ride her dragon, and she gets away with it. Whereas Alicent could not do those things. She has to play it by the book. So I kind of understand, like, is she right in what she's doing? No, absolutely not. I think she's a villain, but I do kind of buy why she's like that. And I have come to like her. Olivia Cook makes me like her. But yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, Olivia Cook is amazing. Yeah, definitely. I liked Alicent Hightower quite a lot, actually. I enjoyed the ping-ponging. I think so. Kayla Stevenson in the comments has a great comment that I think is relevant to Alicent and Rhaenyra, which is, can I just say how differently the show portrays Rhaenyra in the series versus the book? In the book, I feel like I grew to dislike her and Alicent one and the same, but here they're making Rhaenyra more likable and on the verge of being a decent ruler. And I do think the book portrays Alicent and Rhaenyra both as like more vindictive. Alicent especially is like the evil stepmother trope in the book. So she's different. I think she has changed quite a lot for the show, but it's almost funny to me to hear you talk about how she didn't pop for you, Dan, because I feel like
no, that she popped. I keep saying I had a trouble getting a hold on her, like in my own head. Like, where is she coming from? And Natalie, I thought you gave a really good treatise on sort of her personalitylessness, which does track. I don't know. Yeah, she just didn't. She wasn't as like as clear cut a figure in my head as some of the other people were.
Got too much of her daddy in her.
Too much, you shouldn't say that on this show. Incest stuff. You never know what's going to mean. Daniel, I think Daniel may have frozen.
Yeah.
but
It's
we can.
it's a good angle.
It's a good angle, yeah. Not so much Stark there. I like McGillen's comments just about Allison's characterization was all over the place. Just be rude, nailed it, Savannah. I do kind of agree with this, and we'll move on from Allison, but I like the comment that they tried so hard to whitewash her, which is probably what got me to hate her character even more than the books. I don't hate her character. I do feel like if they like Savannah, if they committed to her being more ambitious and aggressive, I'd probably like her more. That's just the way my brain works. But overall,
Yeah.
interesting. How about other characters? Oh, sorry, go
How
ahead.
I feel too. Like if they would have just like committed to her being a little more vindictive, kind of like
more.
the book or something, like just committed to her, which that's what makes House of the Dragon good, because there's moments you kind of like her and you want to be on her side, but then there's other moments where you're just like, ugh, shut up. But after reading the book and now watching, I'm like, no, just hush. Like just either be and be assertive because you want your son on the throne, or be a good queen and understand that your husband named Rhaenyra the heir and you need to back off. Also, there was something earlier on in the series. Oh, Viserys at the names day thing where they're out in the woods hunting and stuff. When he's drunk by the fire, he mentions the prophecy to Alicent.
Right.
Mhm.
I mean,
Son, whether or not it's whatever, and it's just like, girl, you mean to tell me you're misunderstanding 4 or 5 episodes later you couldn't remember that time and by the fire? No,
I should rewatch that scene. That's a good point, because I remember that scene, because I remember that he mentions that he wants his son to have the crown of Aegon the Conqueror. Then later she has that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting. Fog of memory. Any other characters pop out to you guys? Like any other for good or bad reasons? By the way, really quickly, I've kind of come around to the foot fetish scene with Larys and Allison out of nowhere, but I'm like,
Explain.
yeah, maybe it's not that bad. It's weird, but I guess
It
it's
was
kinda
short.
interesting. It was short, but it made a mark. It's what it did. Any other characters stand out to you, either for good or bad reasons?
oh, that's a good question, Dan. That is a good question. I really
Anybody that rhymes with layman, perhaps, starts with a D, very angry and moody.
well, yeah, we all know that I like Damon. I don't care what Damon does. I'm still gonna like Damon because he has
Ooh,
that
nice.
complexity to him. But I would say Viserys because
Sure.
Yeah.
it's Viserys, and I feel like in the books, like they don't portray him quite as well as they do in the series. And I like
Oh
that
no.
make in the series because he's just like, I just want him to be happy with his little family. And these two efforts over here are just like, no, I hate you. Well, I hate you. And he's just like, oh, God. And you can't help but like him. So I'm sad that he had to die, but I know it had to happen. I like Corlys. I think I read something,
Yeah.
not even a bit about him, but that last episode of him kind of like reassuring with Rhaenyra and stuff made me feel like he is stepping into more of a father role with her and being that supportive older man that she needed for reassurance. But maybe that's just
Oh, totally. I see that.
Totally on point.
Mimi Faye also liked Corlys. That was a good subtle thing. Like he didn't like just wasn't there like immediately like Damon was, but he grew me over the season. So that was a nice kind of secondary character progression. We got Joanne. Damon's my favorite. Daniel or Natalie, any favorite or least favorite characters? Anybody who just stood out for you and then why or why? I guess not. Why not? Why?
For me, Aemond. Aemond is a character I like a lot from the book. So I was very curious to see how they were going to do him on the show, and I think they clearly made an effort to make him a more multi-layered character instead of like a psychotic villain. They showed him being bullied as a kid. They made the death of Luke and Arax basically an accident with that, Aemond went out to be a jerk and it slid out of his control. So I liked him a lot, right? I liked Leo Ashton as young Aemond, but Ewan Mitchell, like the second he came on screen, I was like, all right, here's Aemond. This guy is portraying him to the T. I like Jacaerys more than I expected to. He's kind of a character.
Yeah, actually, me too.
I love him.
Yeah,
he's appealing.
I kind of felt like I was
he's
just
got
gonna
moxie, that
overlook
kid.
him. Yeah, one thing. So I'm curious about this. Did any of you guys catch that he was being a real jerk to Luke in the finale? That's the one thing that really
That was
confused
a little
me
odd.
about
Yeah,
Jace.
I guess he was just
He
being
like pushed him on the
too
ground and yelled.
bellicose during their training session.
Yeah, I
I'll
was
allow it.
surprised by that, but yeah, they need to make sure he has some regrets next season.
I'm
Oh,
sure.
yeah. Oh, I wonder if he'd be like, the last thing I did was tell him to do.
It was my
I agree
idea that
that
we should go.
it was, you know, that meme where he's saying send us, and then Luke's pop up was like, please don't send us.
Yes,
I agree that Jace has stood out nicely, and only in like a few episodes, as just, you know, you want someone who's like that stalwart, dependable, just general good guy, and he gives good guy face. Natalie, anybody stood out to you?
Oh man, it's crazy because I feel like at least in Game of Thrones there were so many unlikable characters, and I know we talked about, you know, these characters being really complicated, and this is a world where there's betrayal, backstabbing, murder, like all the bad things, and yet there's not many characters I don't like. There's just a long list of ones that I do. Daemon and Rhaenyra, of course, they're my favorites. I really do love Jacaerys. He is so like sweet and like dependable, and like he really stood out to me too. Viserys, even Alicent. The one I do dislike is Otto. He annoys the crap out of me. Just probably the worst. And Kristen as well. His hair,
God,
but his hair did not change the entire show. Like, make him look different. I don't know.
They should have done something. Apparently, Otto had a different haircut in the start. Daniel told me.
Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't notice that.
I'm rewatching.
It's very subtle.
Oh yeah.
Like, just like put like a gray streak in there or something as after 20 years pass. That's all I'm saying. I mean, I'm sure they're spending a lot of money on wigs already. Maybe they don't have anything left over. Cassandra pointed out Helena, who is like a low-key, nice tertiary favorite. That's always nice. Magellan says that Daemon and I agree with this, that Daemon and Rhaenyra are it for me, but I do wish Bella and Rhaena had a few more lines, which I agree with too. That would be nice to get them to know them a little better. This is a different discussion. The book really fast point. You know what? No, I'm not going to make it. I'm surprised that no one said Daemon, because like if there's one character.
It is a given.
It's not. I don't know. I don't think it's a given.
No one feels we need to say Damon. It's just obvious. Everyone likes Damon. He's the Tyrion of this show. Everyone loves him.
I'm glad you brought that up, Daniel, because someone, I won't name names, but they were like, we don't have a Tyrion in this series. And I was just like, okay, whatever, bro. But Damon is. And if you don't believe that, you need to go watch our episodes back, because he is. Damon is Tyrion.
He is definitely Tyrion of the series. Yeah.
Honestly,
he's the misfit son of the great house who says what the socially inappropriate thing whenever he feels like, which is Tyrion to a T.
Yeah.
I think it took me a while to realize that Daemon is the Tyrion, because he's also like the sexy one and the dangerous one.
Yes.
Not just the funny, smart one.
Well,
so I remember like a few episodes in, I was like, oh, he's the Tyrion. Okay, great. And he's great. I mean, he's just whenever you want a character who like you don't know what they're gonna do, and you know they could pop off in a moment. He always lends tension to a scene, and they got Matt Smith, who is an actor who will bring his own stamp to it. As Kimberly says, Damon doesn't care, and I love it. Yeah, Damon is definitely the most like. The show is much better for him being in it, because he makes everyone around him react to the crazy stuff he does, and it brings out who they are, and it sharpens who he is. And you can get away with writing him doing a lot of crazy stuff, because he's capable of a lot, and has already done stuff. I'm sure he'll do more. So like the show does not work as well without him. He needs to be in there. He's great. Love him. Viserys is great. Rhaenyra is great. Corlys is great. Jace again. I've liked him a lot. Someone said that my Saria was kind of disappointing, which I kind of agree with too. She really hasn't made much of an impact, and I really did not like the way they shoved her into episode 9. I'll just say it right.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on characters? Because I have another question bubbling but but it's a topic change, so I want to make sure we get every campus things first.
I feel like we're not giving Rainey's enough credit either. I feel like
Yep.
her performance.
She was a slow grower for me. Yeah.
No,
It was back and forth.
she's a slow grower,
End
but
of the
I really
season.
appreciate her at the beginning being hard on Rhaenyra, being like, you're going to have to learn how to stand your ground. You're going to have being assertive with her because she's the only one being honest with
Mhm.
Rhaenyra. Everybody's like, oh no, girl, we're just going to make you queen when he dies. And she's like, no, they won't. No, they won't. And so her being stern
She
and
knew. Yeah.
then by the end of it, where she's with Corliss being like, we're here for you. We support you and back you. I think I like that because I couldn't figure out what she was going to do. Like she was very smart and strategic with the girls being betrothed to the boys, with picking sides when it came to who's going to, take over Driftwood if Corliss died. Like you just really didn't know where she was going to stand. She would say one thing, but then she would kind of do another. It's very strategic. And then her waiting it out to see whether or not Rhaenyra was going to take that stand at the end. I'm excited to see what they do next with her. I haven't quite got that far in the book, but
Right. Ooh.
Yeah.
I liked her in the end. I thought that both she and Corliss like had this like very slow burn, but by the final episode, I thought they both were rounded out nicely, and I did like that end. So I was gonna ask, now that we can do a little more deeply, if you had to compare this to the first season of Game of Thrones, which one would you think came out ahead? And I know that we kind of touched on it, but I was interested if you had any follow-up thoughts, because I have a couple. I've mathematically broken it down. And great comments, by the way. I too, Mimi Faye, think Kristen Cole's the worst. I barely think of him as a character because he's just this blob of anger and scripting impossibility. But in terms of anybody, Game of Thrones versus, and another review says Rainey's world's worst grief counselor. Very funny. And Kimberly's going to get us going. Says this season 1 is better than Game of Thrones season 1. Do you agree, people in the panel?
yes, I do. I do. After watching the first 4 episodes over again, because I remember 5 through 10 pretty well, but I needed to go back and look at the first 4. And yeah, that battle scene with Stepstones was just enough of we needed that. Yes. Game of Thrones to me in season 1 moved slowly because there is so much details and everything else that you really need to know. With this, they took that risk and you're just like, all right, we're just going to hang on and figure out these characters through time jumps and everything else. And it needed to be a little bit faster. Because to me, I felt like Game of Thrones was super slow in season 1. I loved it. Like that's one of my favorite seasons to rewatch, but I liked getting a lot of details, getting a lot of characters, growing, children, the dragons and everything else. It just kind of like the budget was better, obviously. But yeah, I don't know. There's just something about the way that, and I honestly think the way that you were just talking about Matt Smith, that's one of the biggest reasons I think that, because in season 1, all you see is Dany and her brother. I don't even want to give him his name because I don't know.
Varys.
Yeah. He don't deserve that good name. He doesn't. That was the only kind of like Targaryen personalities that we saw. You saw the lighthearted Dany, who was super young and naive, and then Viserys, who was just a turd. And so getting this whole entire world of Targaryen and understanding where they come from and why that they are the way they are. House of the Dragon.
By the way, we have lots of good in the comments. People are saying no. People are saying yes. People are saying definitely. People are saying definitely not. Love that you guys are contributing like this. Keep it coming.
I also think they do that because we know how Game of Thrones seasons 2 through 8 go. We don't know what House of the Dragon is going to do. If we just look at season 1 and season 1, Game of Thrones just kind of went along. Yeah, Ned at the end, the whole blessed arc.
I like
but
Nicole's comment that Game of Thrones season 1 had a lot of world building to do since everything was new to us. House of the Dragon able to skip past a lot of that. Just go straight to the characters and drama, which I do agree with. How about you guys? Have anything to? I'm gonna guess you are both on Savannah's side and the side of some of our commentators.
No.
Ooh. Oh no. Okay, Daniel, what do you think?
I am not.
Are you saying, do you agree with LCH Jeremy, who says not better than Game of Thrones season 1? Oh, the comment went away.
Yes.
Do you agree with Hell's Gates, Jeremy?
I do.
Oh, House of Dragon does have potential to be better if overall when it's said and done.
I think it's hard because there's such different types of stories. I touched on this during the Sunday podcast.
Which is nice.
I think House of the Dragon season 1 as a complete story is better than Game of Thrones season 1 because it is a complete story. It's the reign of Viserys Targaryen going to complete and utter shit by the end of the season after he dies. Sure. I think the time jumps, the storytelling is a little more sophisticated. It's hard for me to be quite as objective about this because I loved the books for years before the show was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So like I saw someone, I think maybe Cassandra someone was talking about it being confusing that there were so many characters and places in Game of Thrones, and that didn't matter for me because I knew them all going into it. I think Game of Thrones, we talk about, Dan, I know you really loved episode 9 of House of the Dragon.
I didn't like it at all. Did you hear that?
I know. Yeah. No. So that is, I don't think there was a weak link, personally, I liked episode 9, but I do think it has been kind of divisive. There are people who liked it and didn't like it. Game of Thrones didn't have a weak link like that in the first season. Which the advantage they had was that they followed the book like to a T in season 1. They skipped some things, they changed a couple of things, but there were no major deviations from the source material at all in the first season. It was mainly budget stuff, like they couldn't show that first battle that Tyrion was in. So
they had
I don't think there was anything. Yeah. They had $8. They had to spend them on Daenerys and Viserys's 2 blonde wigs. All the stuff with the Dothraki and Khal Drogo I thought was excellent. So it's hard because I think Game of Thrones, if you liked the broader world building, the more epic fantasy globe-trotting story with more mysteries, because as much as House of the Dragon, I think it's just more polished. It's almost unfair to compare them because it is built on the foundation of Game of Thrones season.
It's definitely more polished. I agree with that.
But I think in terms of the mysteries, Game of Thrones was better because it just had more room for them. Because this show is all about this one family falling apart. It's more focused thematically. Game of Thrones had the White Walkers, it had the houses, it had Daenerys getting her dragons in the first season. It depends on what you like, I guess. But I would be hesitant to really say season 1 of House of the Dragon is better.
A diplomatic answer from Daniel Roman.
That's
I know
me.
Now he has me questioning all of mine.
You're right. I will be the Viserys Targaryen of our podcast and roll down the middle. I'm not going to upset anyone. I think they're both very good. But Game of Thrones for me, there's a reason George R.R. Martin wrote that story as the one that spans a bunch of giant tomes versus Fire and Blood, which is an abridged history. And that is because I think the most compelling plot beats are in Game of Thrones, even though the Dance of the Dragons is the next closest thing in his world, in my opinion.
I can't tell if I like it better or not. Natalie, what do you think?
It's very, very close, but I personally liked House of the Dragon season 1 more. I really liked how it was contained. Like, I think it's good to just focus on something first and then expand, which we might see. I think we're seeing in season 2. Personally, I just like that a little bit more.
We're ready for it now.
Yeah. I like getting to know the characters a lot more. I think the acting in this was, I need to go back and rewatch the first season of Game of Thrones, but I think arguably the acting in this was better. The production, I'd
agree with that.
This might be a hot take, but because these stories, these shows are so plot driven, I'm more into like the cinematography and things like that over a story. I don't care as much about a story at times. So the fact that this had such a bigger budget and looked so much better kind of pushed it over the edge for me. I think it just looked so back. I'm like, this looks kind of bad. I don't know.
Benchmark for how good a fantasy show could look. And you compare it to Hercules, like Xena or something, which is a good show, but just looked like ass compared to what HBO was doing. And now the bar has been raised so much higher. I mean, it looks spectacular. It just does.
Yeah. Can I add one thing to what Natalie was just saying?
Yes.
I do think Game of Thrones hasn't, like, I still love it, obviously, but I do think if you go back and watch season 1, there are some aspects where it's almost a little campy in terms of how it's aged, especially the soundtrack. I think Ramin Djawadi is just like leagues better now than when Thrones started. And you can tell, like, he used a lot more like electronic instruments, like synthesized strings in the early seasons, especially. And that gives it a slightly campier tone. I rewatched The Red Wedding recently, and like, it was amazing, but the soundtrack compared to what he did in House of the Dragon is not on the same level. So that's just
that guy is not messing around. Like, no. I thought maybe he'd be a little bored by this point, but he had some great tunes this season. The Allison Dress thing was great. The Sarah's Walk Across the Floor, that song was great. I'll start by saying that I agree. The what?
The whole wedding sequence had an amazing soundtrack, even though I didn't like the scene as much.
I do agree with LCH Jeremy, who says we can all agree they're both phenomenal. House Dragon has a bright future. I do agree with that. I do think, and it's true that I haven't watched Game of Thrones in a while, so maybe I should go back and watch it. I guess I put a lot of stock in what you said, Daniel, about that not really having a weak link. Like, I think we do forget how many characters popped. Like, Tyrion popped, Arya popped, Daenerys popped. Jon Snow was immediately lovable, even though he's like the Jacaerys equivalent of just kind of like he's steady and you can't, he's great. I mean, I thought even like Cersei popped, Jaime popped, they're twin sex. It was shocking. Bran, it's fine. He got pushed out of it.
Ned and Catelyn. Liza Aaron was in the first season.
Yes, remember all this stuff. Like, these characters were really bringing it hard. And I do think Game of Thrones season 1 told a more balanced kind of and more sort of unimpeachable, at least for the story. You're right. The campy visuals might hurt it if we go all the way back. It's true. But I thought it was a great build. And I do think House of the Dragon fumbled in some ways. I don't think Game of Thrones had as any black hole characters like Kristen Cole, who just every time he's around, I'm like, how are you around? I did not like the episode 9. I just didn't. I thought they were dumbing down the character. I don't think that ever happened. And again, the characters on this kind of show are so important. Like, the show is the characters. If you don't get the characters right, you really don't have anything. So if you're making them act like that they shouldn't act, it really stands out to me. And I didn't like what they were doing to Otto. Didn't like what they were doing to Rhaenys. And I can get past it because the next one rebounded nicely, but that really was a low point. Game of Thrones doesn't really have that. So I think Game of Thrones is better, but House of Dragon has a lot going for it, and it's a marathon and a sprint. I'm looking forward to what they do. As LCH Jeremy says, he thinks Game of Thrones had better acting in season 1. Some of those scenes between Sean Bean, Mark Addy was great too. Lena Headey, Michelle Fairley were second to none. Oh, and he agrees with Daniel. The music in House of Dragon is way better. I haven't listened to the music in House of Dragon in a while. I got to go back for that. That sounds interesting because I guess I'm just used to Ramin Djawadi's later season stuff being epic. Maybe I haven't heard the synthesizer stuff from the early seasons as much recently.
Yeah, it definitely, you don't realize it till you go back and watch it. It was not in my mind even remotely until I rewatched them, and I was like, oh, okay. Ramin's gotten a bigger budget over the years. You can really tell, and he's gotten better at what he does.
Another view says that Maylis is the Ed Sheeran of House of the Dragon. Another view, please explain. I'm curious.
What?
I think in episode 9, probably. Like, why?
Because he shows up and nobody wants him there.
Yeah, I think so. Or just like a random thing. Like, why was that thrown in?
Right. Savannah, any other thoughts on all this? What we've been John about?
It's at a standstill now. After listening to all of y'all, I'm just nice. Okay, I like them both equally now because Game of Thrones is just such a staple. Like, no matter, you just watch it and you just love it. Like, always have. And with House of the Dragon, I feel like there were a few moments, but like, maybe it is recency bias, but at the same time, like, I recently watched season 1, and I'm like, I like this one because of the different ways that I like the time jumps and I like more dragons and to know the characters a little bit more. But I love the Starks too. Like, I don't know. I don't think it's fair to compare them because we didn't know what Game of Thrones was going to be after season 1 of their show. We loved it. I didn't watch it then. I binged, but like, I'm assuming everybody loved it, which is why it got seasons 2 through 8 or whatever else. With House of the Dragon, like we didn't know what to expect, and it was awesome. So yeah, like what they're gonna fix their mistakes from the early episodes of Game of Thrones, even the late ones that people don't like. So it's just like that's why people think it's better because they fixed what they did wrong with a lot of ways. And I'm so over hearing people, well, the writing sucks and blah 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 blah. No, it doesn't. It is freaking phenomenal. Outside of episode 9, I really can maybe count on one hand the things that I didn't like or didn't think were good writing. And so everybody's like, well, they might fumble season. No, fam. No, like y'all stop.
Hopefully
like this is going to be good. These people have been doing this for so long. Grandpa George is not going to put out something terrible. So just love it. I don't know.
They're both good. They're both different. I do like if you think about House of Dragon, like I have problem like Kristen Cole's a bit of a black hole. My Seria's kind of been like a little but yeah, it's good. Someone said that they're paper thin characters. I don't agree with that. I think they might not have
not at all.
like the breadth and depth of the Game of Thrones cast, but that's a fine kind. You know, they weren't based on these giant novels. I will say some great comments, by the way. Man, you guys are really bringing it. As Q says, the Alicent and Rhaenyra dynamic is confusing. We went over that though.
Someone said that
it is.
I didn't like the fact that Alicent and Rhaenyra were both completely different from the book, which I find interesting because Rhaenyra did kind of shock me while reading the book because of what her and Daemon did together, according to Mushroom. Anyway,
Mushroom, that guy. Oh, Savannah, now that you're reading, and Natalie, do you wish Mushroom were here?
Yes, kind of. I just want to see him in the back, like lurking around and
that would be kind of fun.
Yeah, because like he's the one that's seeing all this stuff, so everything else is secondhand, and they don't want to take his word because he's Mushroom. But I'm
according to Mushroom, he's the one seeing all this stuff.
Who are we to question Mushroom? No, we don't fight about
fair.
Mushroom.
If we could pull back for like a meta thing for a second. I'm not sure if we all watched Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power.
No.
So it's unfair to compare this show to the other Game of Thrones show. Well, it's even more unfair to compare this to Lord of the Rings, and we're going to do it anyway. Just for a brief second.
Is it? I think it's more fair.
Oh, no, it's not. I think it's fair to
Amazon
compare both
spent $500 million. It's way more fair to compare it to The Rings of Power.
And they were like kind of put next to each other. Do you think this show did what HBO needed it to do, I guess, which is, be good, get people talking about Game of Thrones again, maybe turn it into a little franchise they can marvelize in the next 20 years or whatever. I hope they don't do it. And I mean, yes, also beat out Rings of Power, which was airing at the same time. Was this a success? It was a success for us, like as viewers. I think we can all say that. Was it a success for HBO in terms of where this goes next?
Yeah, I think undeniably yes. I mean, it's basically their biggest show since Game of Thrones ended. Yeah, well, I think what you said about it, I'm gonna mute someone else talk. My phone's ringing. Ooh. Okay, it's gone. I'm awash with tech issues today. I think it did. So far, so good. Yeah, okay, cool. I think it laid to rest those really stupid arguments that I've never agreed with, that no one cares about Game of Thrones anymore. Yeah. Obviously, that's not true.
That's stupid.
I think it did prove that it could be a franchise, that they could make other shows and people would come out for them. I hope that they take the lesson of what they did right in this instance, which is they didn't try to churn out something as soon as Thrones ended and try to, here are our 4 shows, which is not to throw shade at Netflix, but is what The Witcher has done.
Yeah.
And The Walking Dead. They
I
basically
love
kneecapped their own ending by saying, here are our 5 spin-offs for all our main characters. So now you can go into the finale knowing none of them will die. So I hope that HBO takes that lesson to their other shows and takes the time to make each one as good as House of the Dragon, because I think that is what has made House of the Dragon work, is that they took their time. They told a very difficult story to tell in a very ambitious way. And they focused on the quality, which is like, that's HBO's thing. Like, that's their stamp.
Yeah.
I hope they stick to that, and they can make as many shows as they want, but just don't rush to cram them down our throats, because that is where I think they'll get into trouble.
I agree. Kimberly asked, what is ROP? That is the Rings of Power, which the commenters, when I agree with them, are very much saying was the lost this little battle.
Easily.
Which, Natalie, you watch both. Did Amazon ever have a chance here?
I don't think so. So I haven't finished the Rings of Power. So that tells me where my head's at. It looks great, and that's the only reason I'll finish it. No other reasons, really. Yeah. Whereas House of the Dragon, I'm like on the edge of my seat every week. So yeah.
Savannah, does this make you want like another Game of Thrones show? Like, has this stoked the fires of franchise interest in you?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just mad that I have to wait 2 years, but I understand why I have to wait 2 years, because you need good writing. You need to take that time to make sure things are done the right way. But I would love to see the Jon Snow spinoff. I would love to see on the Conqueror time frame. Like, maybe make that a mini series. And like do
or
something
a movie even.
Or even just a movie, something
that'd be cool.
I need to see it. I've read about it, listened to it. Like, I need to see that. Like, more than I need to see a remake of season 8 of Game of Thrones.
Don't remake season 8 of Game of Thrones. That's madness. No one should do that. I think with Rings of Power too. We talked about weak links, how episode 9 maybe is debatably the weak link of House of the Dragon season
maybe
1.
Debatably, just say it.
I'm saying debatably. I liked it. I liked episode 8. I agree with some of the issues, but I still enjoyed it. I've rewatched that one probably more than most of the season. I don't know. Don't ask me.
It's convincing yourself the whole time. Okay, go on.
Yeah, Rings of Power had issues the whole way through. I agree with someone who said the visuals are fantastic. The story was boring. It's fascinating to me because they almost went the opposite direction of House of the Dragon. Rings of Power is based on something that spans thousands of years, and they basically said, we can't do that. Let's make this as streamlined as possible and cram all our events together so we don't need to recast characters, introduce new characters as we go on. We can get a Isildur hanging out with very early second age people, and we'll make it work. And House of the Dragon went the opposite way and said, we're going to have time jumps every other episode. The viewers are going to have to be smart enough to keep up with us. And I think the proof is in the pudding. Like, it worked.
Pudding. People are smart. People will. Sorry.
So Kimberly was like, am I the only person that didn't have a problem with season 7 and 8? I love season 7 and 8 of Game of Thrones. I have no problems with any of it. I was just making fun of people who hate Game of Thrones season 8 because they didn't like how it ended.
I liked season 7.
I liked it all. I watch it like all the time. Christmas coming up. I don't know what it is, but I like to watch it like in December because I can usually finish it by Christmas.
White Walker's coming down and everything.
Yeah.
Holiday-ish. Yeah.
That's a whole other
7
podcast.
and 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that I've rewatched them both recently too, right before House of the Dragon. Yeah. I like them both. I think there are really, really good things about both of them. The Long Night, I wouldn't change a thing. I just wish there were more episodes before it.
And lighting, better lighting.
No,
I love the lighting.
They didn't.
The lighting is the way it should look.
Yes.
See anything.
But
you can convey a sense of darkness without actually making it hard for us to see. Sorry, go on.
Nah. It is
Show
the
him, Daniel.
part. It is
Show
the
him, Daniel.
apocalypse.
Show
I
him.
will.
The site.
But yeah, I think rewatching Game of Thrones season 8, there are just things I think they should have taken a little more time with, even though I love a lot of the stuff
I agree
that
with
happened.
Q. The second half
But
was
yeah.
the bad part. But
Dan's
we're
right.
getting to
Another
the end
podcast.
of our hour here. Any final thoughts? House of the Dragon season 1. Just in general. I'm not gonna ask a question. Just any final thoughts.
Loved it.
Yep. They
Cool.
did such a great job with it, with the writing, the character like the casting, all of it. It's just kind of like it's just setting a tone for what's to come, and I'm excited for season 2. I trust the writers. I trust Grandpa George to get this other book done. I'm like,
So much
let me.
fun.
This is so okay. I've watched Game of Thrones a ton. I've started reading the books on Kindle that way, but I bought a hard copy of this one for a reason, and that's because I'm so interested in what's going to happen next and knowing the next move, how they're going to, incorporate it and everything else. Like that should tell you kind of what this season has done for me, because I'm not someone that's just like jumps on board right away, but I've absolutely loved it. There's only been a few things that I was just like didn't like, and even rewatching episode 9, I've grown to appreciate it. I don't necessarily love it, but like I get it, and so I'm just like buying too many House of the Dragon things because I'm now in love with the show even more, and I think it made me love the Game of Thrones even more because it makes me understand
Yeah.
came from, even though that show was before everything, before all this. Like I understand it a little bit better now because we're getting more in depth of certain characters and stuff.
We don't talk about how the new show has done a good job of like situating itself in the same universe and feeling like it's like it like this literally did lead into the other thing. That's nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're pretty out of time. Daniel, Natalie, you want to say anything else, or can we wrap this up?
Natalie?
No, I really, really loved it. I agree with Savannah. I liked Game of Thrones. I loved Game of Thrones, but it never made me be like, let me read all the books. And now I am. So that's a testament to the show. Did you find the page, Daniel?
Oh yeah,
I
did you?
did. I did. Okay. So the long night. Let's see if we can do this.
I can't see.
This is the
That's
nice.
awesome.
The first long night. This is the kind of color palette, and I feel like they pulled that off in the show
They nailed it.
pretty exactly.
I
They
don't
do.
know what
It
you're
should
talking about.
look
I can
light
see
there,
what the
though.
guy looks like.
His sword's on fire. Whenever there's fire,
And
you
I
can
can
see
see
what
what
was
he
going on
looks
in the
like.
show too.
A whole other
I
podcast.
loved. Yeah, totally.
Yes.
Is the lighting good or bad? Let's discuss.
Hour and a half.
I loved House of the Dragon season 1. I think it was an enormous success. It's so fascinating now to think about it and be like, was it any good? Like, what do we think? Because a few months ago we were all like, please don't let it suck. Please don't let it suck. And it didn't. So yeah, yay, House of the Dragon. Can't wait for season 2. I also just want to say I think it was Tanesha B in the chat. We'll talk about the Peripheral next week. So come back and listen if you do want to hear talk about that.
We do this show every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time on the Winter is Coming Facebook page and the Winter is Coming YouTube page. If you're all watching, if you watch us now, please feel free to subscribe, ring the bell, come back to see all our fun, wonderful, beautiful insights and content. We're also available in podcast form wherever podcasts are available, be it Google Play, iTunes, or elsewhere. This has been fun. The Sunday shows are now over, but we're going to keep doing the Wednesday afternoon shows until something else pops up. I don't know. Watch something else. So see you guys then. We'll be back next Wednesday, but there will be a 10-year time jump in between. We will all be recast with new people. See you then. Goodbye.